Hey there, this is Wake Angel 2001, and yesterday we all saw the new Pokemon Direct showing the quick little tantalizing teasing image of what the new Pokemon game is going to look like, including the first forms of the 3 starters. And I put out a little video that I've been sitting on for a while. Anyone who watches me on DeviantArt knows that I basically just took one of the journals I had written a while ago and made a video about it, about what I'd like to see in the next generation. But here's the thing. A couple weeks ago, I was watching some videos about Pokemon on YouTube, and I came across a video about that ranked the pseudo-legendaries. Yeah, we know what the pseudo-legendaries are. They're those Pokemon where their base stats add up to 600. You know, like Dragonite or Tyranitar, Salamence, Metagross. What are the rest of them? Garchomp, Hydreigon, Komodo, and Goodra. So, yeah, like everyone knows about the pseudo-legendaries. And I made in the comments section of the video, like, the pseudo-legendaries are kind of cool and all, but I really always preferred the pseudo-starter Pokemon because they tend to be easier to raise and you can get them at an earlier point and they fit into your party so much nicer. And then somebody points out to me in the comments that pseudo-starters aren't a thing. Pseudo-starters aren't a thing? Like, I looked it up on Bulbapedia. Pseudo-legendary is a fan term, yet it has an entry in Bulbapedia. So, I say, if pseudo-legendary can be a fan term, then we could totally make pseudo-starter a fan thing. So, like, my goal is that we can hopefully get pseudo-starter an entry on Bulbapedia, or into the usual Pokemon lexicon that everybody knows about, even if it's not technically official. So, what is a pseudo-starter Pokemon, according to, you know, me? I'm gonna give some criterion that I hope everyone can agree with. Maybe you can help me refine it in the comments, or let me know if it's good. But really, if you think it's good, I want you to try and spread this around and make this a commonly used term. Hopefully we can get pseudo-starter to really be a thing. Please. Alright, so I've come up with 4 basic criteria that can make a Pokemon a pseudo-starter. And the first rule is that it must evolve twice. Yes, it's not enough just to be the Pokemon that's given to the player at the beginning of the game. That is not the criteria of a starter Pokemon. That's what you do in the spin-off brands and the special titles. No, in order to be a starter Pokemon, you have to evolve twice. So, sorry Pikachu and Eevee, you know I love both of you, and you are very much 2 prominent faces of the franchise, but you do not meet the criterion of being a starter Pokemon. Still hoping to see some more Eevee evolutions in the next generation. And hey, maybe they'll make another regional variant for Pikachu. Maybe if they make Raichu a dark type, people will like him more. Haha. Criteria number 2 is that it must evolve by leveling alone. There are plenty of Pokemon that evolve twice, but there's also a lot of them that evolve with some kind of gimmick, whether it has to be by trade, friendship, knowing a specific move, evolving in a particular place, using evolution stones, carrying particular items. There's a whole bunch of kinds of different ways to get Pokemon to evolve, but starter Pokemon only evolve by leveling up. So a pseudo-starter must also evolve only by leveling up. The third criteria is that they have to evolve at certain levels. All the starter Pokemon evolve somewhere from 14 to 20 the first time, and then somewhere between 30 and 40 the second time. So a pseudo-starter also has to evolve between those levels. That means the typical regional bug Pokemon like Butterfree, and also like Weedle and all the others, like that evolve at really low levels, they're really good for Pokemon trainers that are just starting out, but they're not pseudo-starter Pokemon. And criteria number 4, of course, it can't already be a pseudo-legendary. Now, all the existing legendaries are already pretty much eliminated because of the levels that they evolve at, but I'm just covering my bases, just in case Generation 8 comes out with a pseudo-legendary that evolves at lower levels. Like, basically, if you meet the pseudo-legendary criteria of having your stats add up to 600, then yeah, you can't be a pseudo-starter. But, yeah, I just wanted to throw this in there to cover my bases.
Also, one more note regarding branched evolution paths. It's alright if the Pokemon has a branched evolution path, so long as at least one of the branches still meets the previously stated 4 criterion. So like Wurmple here would never really qualify as a pseudo-starter because all of its forms evolve before the requisite levels, but Ralts still can because although Gallade evolves with a stone, Gardevoir still evolves through natural leveling and at the proper level. So that's the rules I've set up.
And so there you go. See, it's really easy to establish a set of rules that can make certain Pokemon into a kind of category that we can all log. So let's try to make pseudo-starters a thing. And just to show how easily a thing it can be made, why don't we go through the previous 7 generations and take a look at all the pseudo-starters. There's actually not as many of them as you'd think. So let's go on and I'll show you the pseudo-starters, and I'll also bring up a couple honorable mentions, because there's some that almost make it, but not quite.
Generation 1, the Pidgey line. Ah yes, Pidgey, Pidgeotto, and Pidgeot. This is likely the first Pokemon that a lot of trainers ever caught, because it was one of the first ones you could catch right outside the opening village in the very original Pokemon games. And it does evolve at about the right levels as a starter Pokemon does. It was even given a Mega Evolution starting in the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire games. And yeah, I mean, do I really need to tell anybody about Pidgey? I mean, Ash had a Pidgeotto for the entire first season of the anime, and it evolved into a Pidgeot in its final episode where it stayed to guard Pallet Town from that evil Fearow. So, yeah, of course Pidgeotto is a kind of a big deal. And you know what? I always did have a soft spot for Pidgey. I always make sure that when I catch my first Pidgey, I give it a cute nickname and evolve it all the way up to Pidgeot, even if I don't plan on keeping it in my party. Generation 2 saw Mareep and almost Hoppip as pseudo-starters. Hoppip is unfortunately disqualified as a pseudo-starter because his third form, Jumpluff, is evolved from Skiploom at level 27, just a little bit too soon to be considered a pseudo-starter. Mareep, however, evolves into Flaffy and then Ampharos at just the right levels, and it's actually a really good Pokemon, so popular in fact that it got to be a Mega Evolver later on in the franchise. Now, the funny thing about Generation 2 is there's problems with it that I didn't really notice when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I noticed that that the level balance of the Pokemon you encountered all worked out better. Like, it was easier to take on the gym leaders as they weren't so overpowered, you didn't have to grind so much, and even the Elite Four weren't quite as powerful as they were in the original game. But then the Pokemon distribution wasn't as good. Ampharos was really the best Pokemon you could catch in the pregame, and a lot of the best Pokemon weren't made available to you until postgame. They should have made Houndour or something you could catch in the Johto region and not wait for you to get all the way to Kanto for it. Generation 3 was pretty cool. It had 3 pseudo-starters, Ralts, Whismur, and Slakoth. And one of them, Gardevoir, even gets a Mega Evolution later on, including a branched evolutionary path with Gallade. And this is back when it was a pure Psychic. It only became a Fairy type in the 6th generation. But yeah, that's a whole 3 of them, and they're all kind of cool looking, and, except for Slaking, which has that Truant ability that makes it really irritating to use. But yeah, the Giant Sloth Pokemon, the Living Boombox, and the Waifu, even though it can also be a boy, so, yeah. Okay, so let's go on to Generation 4. Generation 4 only had 2, but one of them was the regional bird, something we haven't seen since the first generation. So we got Starly and Shinx. And, what was up with Generation 4? Was it like the Edgelord generation? I mean, look at these guys. Like, the bird even has a freaking fringe coming down over its face. Kind of awesome looking, but yeah, kind of edgelordy. It seems like these were the Pokemon that were designed by teenagers. But yeah, seriously, in all truth, the Shinx line, probably one of my favorite pseudo-starters. They just look so cool. I mean, it also kind of looks like a little blue Lion King, like little Simba. Although I don't think that Luxray is meant to be a lion. I think it's meant to be a lynx or something, but I digress. Generation 5 also had 2 pseudo-starters, Lillypup and Pidove, or Pidove, however you're supposed to pronounce that. You know what? Pidove looks the most like an actual pigeon that I've ever seen anything look, even more than Pidgey. And it's kind of cool that its full evolutionary line has the sexual dimorphism thing in Unpheasant. And they even did the thing where it's the male that's more colorful and flashy, just like most real-life birds. Although Lillypup has a weird evolutionary line. It goes from a Chihuahua to something that looks like a Yorkshire Terrier to something that just looks like a bigger Yorkshire Terrier with ridiculous whiskers. I don't really get it. I think if they were trying to go with you start out as a tiny small breed dog and turn into a big dog, then shouldn't the last one have been a Saint Bernard or something? I don't know. Generation 6. It only had one pseudo starter in Fletchling, the regional bird of that generation. Although it's the only one, it's still a pretty cool pseudo starter. I mean, you start out as this little sparrow-looking thing, and then you end up with a firehawk. I mean, that's a pretty cool pseudo starter. I mean, shame that there's only one, but at least it's pretty interesting looking. Now we come to the current Generation 7, which doesn't have a pseudo starter. I went through the Pokedex, and the closest thing is the pikipek line. Unfortunately, Toucanon evolves at level 28, 2 levels short of the requirement for being a pseudo starter Pokemon. So this is the only of the generations that doesn't have a pseudo starter. That kind of sucks. Still, the new Pokemon for Generation 7 were mostly pretty cool, even if they didn't have a pseudo starter. So I guess that's just how it had to run for once. It's a shame that we can't even rely on the regional bird to be the pseudo starter this time, because that, as we can see from previous generations, that's usually how it's gone. But yeah, that's my idea. Like, I've been told that pseudo starters aren't a thing, and they really should be a thing because it's something that almost always happens. I wonder what kind of pseudo starters we're going to get in Generation 8. Will it be another regional bird? Probably. But will it be stuff besides the regional bird? Who knows? Only time will tell. So let me know if you can think of any other qualifications for what will be a pseudo starter, or if you think that we should get pseudo starter as a thing. And share this around. Try to get pseudo starter to be a thing.